Bill was 20 years old the first time he felt proud of his savings. Not because it was huge, it wasn't, but because it was his. A few $1,000s sat neatly in his bank account, earned from long shifts, skipped nights out, and saying no when his friends said yes. Every month, the number crept upward. Slowly, quietly, comfortingly. To Bill, that number meant safety. It meant progress. It meant he was doing the right thing. Then one afternoon, standing in a grocery store aisle, something didn't add up. Bill grabbed the same items he always did. Same brand, same sizes, same routine. But when he reached the register, the total was higher than he expected. Not shocking, just higher. He shrugged it off. A fluke, maybe. But the same thing happened the next week. And the week after that. Gas cost more. Rent listings looked insane. Even fast food felt expensive. Meanwhile, his savings account sent him polite little notifications. Interest earned this month, $4.17. That's when Bill did something most people never bother to do. He pulled out his calculator. At the rate his bank was paying, barely over 1%, his money would take more than 70 years to double. 70 years. Bill laughed at first. Then he stopped. 70 years meant his money wasn't really growing in his lifetime. And worse, prices weren't waiting. They were climbing every year, quietly, relentlessly. What scared him wasn't that his money was standing still. It was that it was falling behind without him noticing. On paper, his balance went up. In real life, it bought less. That night, Bill realized something most people don't discover until their 40s or 50s. Saving money is not the same as growing money. There was a gap, a dangerous, invisible gap, between the number on the screen and what that number could actually do for his life. And if he didn't understand it now, time would make sure he paid for it later. So Bill decided to learn why this was happening, and more importantly, how to fix it before time slipped through his fingers. Bill started digging, and what he found was unsettling. Inflation wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It didn't crash through the door. It seeped in like a slow leak, unnoticed until the damage was done. Every year, prices rose a little. Rent edged up. Groceries nudged higher. Utilities climbed. Not enough to panic, just enough to erode value. And while his savings account paid him 1%, inflation averaged closer to 3 or 4%. That meant something brutal. Even though Bill's money was growing, its purchasing power was shrinking. If inflation ran at 4% and his savings earned 1%, his real return wasn't positive at all. It was negative. He was losing about 3% every year, silently. The scariest part? It didn't feel like losing. His balance still went up. Statements still looked healthy. But it was an illusion, like walking up a down escalator. His legs were moving, but the machine underneath him was pulling him backward. And inflation compounded too. Each year didn't just raise prices. It raised the starting point for the next year. Which meant every future dollar Bill earned had to fight harder just to stand still. This explained something Bill had always wondered about older people. Why so many of them said, "I saved my whole life, but it doesn't feel like enough." They weren't careless. They weren't irresponsible. They just trusted numbers instead of understanding what those numbers could buy. Bill realized something important. The real enemy wasn't low effort. It was invisible math. If he wanted time to work for him instead of against him, he needed a way to measure progress honestly. Not emotionally, not visually, mathematically. That's when he discovered a simple rule, one so old it existed before spreadsheets, that would change how he viewed every financial decision he made. The rule was called the Rule of 72, and Bill loved it immediately because it didn't pretend to be complicated. Take the number 72, divide it by your annual return. The result tells you roughly how many years it takes for your money to double. That's it. At 10% returns, 72 divided by 10 equals about 7 years. At 6%, about 12 years. At 3%, 24 years. At 1%, a lifetime. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. This rule didn't just show growth, it showed speed. It revealed how fast or slow time was actually working. Two accounts could both be growing, but one was crawling while the other was sprinting. Bill ran the numbers on his own future. If he planned to retire in roughly 40 years, how many doubling cycles would he get? At 1%, barely half of one. At 4%, maybe one. At 10%, multiple. And that's when Bill noticed something even more powerful than returns themselves: time. Returns mattered, sure, but starting early multiplied everything. One extra doubling cycle didn't just add money, it changed outcomes completely. Money that doubled 3 times didn't just grow, it transformed. Bill realized that chasing higher returns later wouldn't fix starting late. Time was the one asset you could never buy back. And because Bill was only 20, time was the one advantage he already had if he used it. Why starting early beats starting bigger? To make it real, Bill ran a thought experiment. He imagined 2 people. The first started investing at 22. Not aggressively, just consistently. A few $100s a month, earning around 10%. Nothing flashy, just discipline. The second waited 10 years. More confident, higher income, bigger monthly contributions. On paper, the late starter invested more money. In reality, the early starter ended with dramatically more. Why? Because the early dollars had more time to compound on themselves. Those early contributions didn't just grow, they began generating returns that generated more returns, over and over again. Compounding wasn't linear, it was exponential. Starting late was like planting a tree after the growing season ended. You could water it harder, fertilize it more, but you could never recover the lost years of growth underground. That's when Bill understood something most people never do until it's too late. The goal isn't to invest more later, it's to invest sooner. Time multiplies effort, and without time, effort has limits. But one question still bothered him. If time was the engine, where should that engine run? Not all investments moved at the same speed, and some came with serious risks. Bill needed to choose wisely. Building an engine that beats inflation, Bill compared different paths using the rule of 72. A savings account at 1%, 72 years to double, and inflation erased much of it anyway. Government bonds at 5%, around 14 years. Better, but slow. The stock market's long-term average neared 10%, roughly 7 years per doubling. Real estate, combining appreciation and income, about 8 to 9 years, plus leverage. Then there were high-risk assets, explosive returns, fast doubling times, but massive volatility. Many people made money there, but even more lost it by jumping in and out at the wrong times. Bill realized something critical. The fastest engine is useless if you can't stay seated. Smart investing wasn't about betting everything on speed. It was about balance. Stability to survive downturns, growth to beat inflation, optional upside without wrecking the plan. And inflation? Inflation was the referee you couldn't ignore. A 6% return with 4% inflation wasn't really 6%. It was closer to 2%. That stretched the real doubling timeline from 12 years to more than 30. So the real goal wasn't doubling money on paper. It was doubling purchasing power in real life. That meant minimizing fees, understanding taxes, reinvesting gains, and choosing assets designed to outpace rising costs. not just feel safe. When Bill finally stepped back, something shifted. He stopped chasing numbers. He started building a system where time weren't with him, where growth quietly compounded, where decisions shortened, not stretched the doubling clock. And at 20 years old, Bill realized the most valuable thing he owned wasn't money at all. It was time, and the wisdom to use it before it slipped away. Inflation quietly reduces what your money can buy, even when your savings grow. This video explains how rising prices shrink purchasing power and why low interest can make you fall behind without realizing it. Learn the simple truth about inflation and why your money needs to grow faster than prices. Disclaimer: this video is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. The examples and opinions shared are based on personal research and experience. Investing involves risk. Always do your own research or consult with a licensed financial professional before making investment decisions. If you found value in this story, please like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching.